Suikoden II, that game where you can recruit flying, murdering squirrels into your army and let them go into the bath with you.
Who is it? I reserved this bath for today. Nina, is that you? If it is, you're proving just how much of a brat you actually are.
Muku Muku.
I wouldn't try it.
Motherfucker! And this is the spoiler warning for this video. There are going to be a ton of spoilers in this review. So if you don't want to be spoiled, please tune out now. And before you go, I just got to say, if you can find some way to make some time in your life to play this game, you will not regret it. It is one of the best RPGs ever made, and it has a fantastic story. So do not watch this video and spoil yourself. Trust me, you will enjoy this game so much more going into it, knowing as little as possible. So today is Suikoden II day, and it's a day that arrived a lot sooner than I thought it would. And coincidentally enough, as we see on the case behind me here, I have, the Suikoden II game case and the strategy guide. I just bought the strategy guide this year because it was the only one I was missing from, my collection. So I think it's, it's good to have on the shelf there. Everyone can kind of look at the game art and stuff. It's good for the background, definitely. So when I started playing Suikoden II, after playing Suikoden 1, it quickly dawned on me that, I'm going to be reviewing my favorite game of all time. So I'm definitely feeling the pressure to do this game justice with this tribute review. Just pressure from myself mostly, because I just want to do right by this game because it's my favorite for a multitude of reasons. I'm going to do my best to explain why. And before I start the review, I just got to quickly say, going from Suikoden 1 to Suikoden 2 so quickly, it has just made it blatantly obvious that Suikoden 2 improves upon Suikoden 1 in every way fathomable. Graphics are better, music's better, characters are more interesting, way better villains. World building is more profound. They just do everything better in this game. They took all the systems from the first game and just improved upon them. They didn't reinvent the wheel at all. The only thing that really changed significantly was the war battles, And there wasn't a need to change all these systems because, the first game was so well received and a lot of people loved the mechanics that were in it. They just, they're like, okay, we'll just, tweak everything and make it a little bit better. And it fucking shows. And it is how a sequel to a beloved game should be done. You just take what works and improve upon it. And the things that don't work, you create new systems for. One of the first things that's blatantly obvious in Suikoden 2 is the sprite work is much improved. As soon as you take control of your main character and you get into your first fight, it's blatantly obvious. The backgrounds are better. The sprites actually have movement to them now when they're stationary waiting for command prompts, and they just feel more alive. Bosses are also much more imposing in this game, and they have great sprite animations in battle as well, with a lot of their attacks looking particularly cool. And in terms of battles, the first game had, okay battle music. The second game has some amazing battle tracks, especially for some of the bosses. It has some of the most iconic boss themes of all time. And I can't go without mentioning this one in particular, the Necklord battle theme. There's just something about watching good sprite work in motion, and there's just something particular about watching good sprite work when it comes to combat and then fighting one another. Perfect example of this is the Two River battle, where sprites are battling each other outside of the traditional battle system just for story purposes. I don't know what it is, but I could just let the dialogue sit and watch these sprites fight in the background because it was just so pleasing to the eye. And since we're on the topic of fighting, random encounters in this game, the battle transitions into them are damn near instantaneous. And when you combine that with the fact that random battles themselves occur very quickly and are over very fast, it doesn't make them annoying, and it makes the game flow incredibly well. Even when you are in areas that have a higher encounter rate than usual, it's still not annoying because, battles are just occurring one after the other super quickly, and you don't feel like you're really bogged down in terms of making progress. And in terms of scale, cities are also much larger in a lot of instances. They have more sprites, they're more detailed, and they're just more full of life in general, and very pleasing to traverse and to look at. And the 6-person party battle system remains intact, as it should, and thank Christ it does, because this game has even better characters than the first, and it's even more difficult to pick who you're going to bring with you. The rune system also returns in this game, and instead of the first where you're only allowed 1 rune slot, you're allowed anywhere from 2 to 3, and this just adds a greater amount of customization to occur per character. And the more savvy players will be able to abuse this system, absolutely, to make very overpowered characters, but it's not something you have to do. And honestly, I've never minded the option of having a little bit of, game breaking occur in a game, but you don't have to do it. It's just there for you if you want to. Rune magic works very much the same as Suikoden 1. You only have so many charges per level of magic, and a lot of the spells in Suikoden 2 look fucking fantastic. And along with the return of rune magic is also the return of unite attacks. A lot of them being incredibly viable. You can get specific items this time in Suikoden 2 that make them even more powerful. And some of them are really viable and cool to watch, and some of them are just there for hilarity's sake. But one thing that's no joke in this game is how much better the fortress building system is. Your fortress in this game is much more intricate. It feels full of life with tons of NPCs kicking around, not just the characters you recruit. And this time I legitimately got lost a couple of times, just, scouring my castle for several different NPCs, and that is awesome. And there are many awesome new additions to the castle this time. One in particular is the background investigation checks you can do on your party members in order to learn a lot more about them, and it serves as a great way to add a little bit more world building to the game. Staples also return, such as being able to have baths in your castle with varying different party members, and sometimes you can even trigger a unique conversation or two. Just don't invite the squirrels. And speaking of unique dialogue, characters' dialogue in your castle town will change on occasion after significant story beats, making it more interesting to go around and talk to everybody. And unlike the first game, all of your recruitable characters aren't locked to one specific part of the castle. Oftentimes they'll move around and engage in different activities and be hanging out with different characters that you've recruited, and it just makes it so much more interesting to run around your own castle and to talk to everybody and to see what they have to say and who they're hanging out with. And it's awesome just to see everybody kind of chilling at the bar, having a drink, and just, all hanging out with one another. Duels also make a return in this game. They function very much the same way as Suikoden 1 did, with you trying to decipher the enemy character's dialogue to, guess what they're going to do next. But they're still fun, and they're still there largely for climactic moments that are occurring in this story to make them more dramatic. The mini games in Suikoden 2, I had forgotten how good some of them were, particularly the cooking mini game. That game just made you excited to find every new recipe you came across and to use it in the cook-offs. Shit, the minigame even had its own story, which I found interesting. It had suicidal cooks, for God's sakes. And when you had finally defeated the last cook, there's even an end credit sequence when you complete this minigame, because there was just, frankly, a lot of work put into it. And it was one of the most enjoyable side activities in the whole game. And aside from the cooking minigame, we also had, a whack-a-mole minigame. We had a rope climbing minigame, which had some great rewards in it. And then we had, dice throwing was back again. And it was a little bit better this time because you and your opponent were not constantly rolling your dice out of the goddamn bowl. The biggest overhaul in Suikoden 2 undoubtedly is the war battles. Instead of a simple kind of rock, paper, scissors mechanic, like the first game, you have varying different unit types in war battles this time. You have archers, cavalry, infantry, with a lot of characters having unique special abilities that they can grant to the unit they're placed within. And even though the war battles were more intricate this time and they were a bit more interesting, a lot of the battles themselves were not really winnable in a sense. They were very much story driven. You would lose them no matter what, or they would resolve themselves after, a few turns. But the ones that you could fully participate in and finish to completion were very enjoyable. It's time to talk about the game's story. Suikoden II's story still makes me swell with emotion after playing it for, I've lost count. I don't know if this is my 6th or 7th time replaying the game or more, is just a testament to this game's good writing and the fact that it has characters you actually give a shit about. Suikoden II, unlike Suikoden I, immediately hooks you with drama. Right out of the gate, you are the victim of a false flag attack. All of your friends are being butchered around you, and it's accompanied by an excellent theme that encapsulates the situation. And there's a little bit of NPC dialogue that occurs during this moment where you see a couple of your buddies really struggling to get away. And one of them is, just barely hanging off the shoulder of his buddy. And he's essentially crying for his mother. I don't know what it is about that type of situation, seeing young men or just men in general crying for their moms when they're badly wounded. It gets me in all types of different media. It always affects me quite a bit, and this instance is no different. Anything that can trigger my emotions like that, I am immediately interested in. And the tone is continuously being set at the beginning of the game. Another perfect example of this is when you get to the game's opening credit sequence, and it shows you the past of, our two main characters before they head off to war, and the theme that accompanies it really sets the mood for what type of game this will be. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the amount of fan service in this game is just almost sickeningly good. Perfect example. One of the cliffhangers of the original game is resolved almost immediately with on-screen appearances of Flick and Victor. But even though this game does have great fan service and a lot to love, there is one thing that did plague the first game that does plague the second, and that is the translation could have been much better, and it is, almost overflowing with errors at points. But once again, that is very much a staple of translation work in this era. And since I was looking at it more critically, I did notice it on more occasions, but it was never enough to really break my immersion in the game. So while the quality of translation wasn't improved for the second game, another thing that was vastly improved was the quality of this game's villains, particularly the main antagonist, Luca Blight. Luca is batshit crazy, and I fucking love it. He has an overpowering presence in every scene that he's in. And his overpowering presence is solidified with the now infamous Die Pig Die scene. He commits terrible atrocities, but I understand why he does it. It never states this blatantly in the game, but anyone who's read, Wikipedia entries or, just knows a lot about the lore Luca Blight's mother was assaulted and raped in front of him repeatedly when he was a child by thugs from the city-state of Joustin. So I understand where his hatred comes from. I just obviously don't condone his actions, but I get it. And because I get it, it makes him infinitely more interesting and even a little sympathetic. And the other thing that made Luca Blight so memorable is the way that you take him out in the game. He's the main antagonist, but he's gone 2/3 of the way through the game. And instead of 6 characters being needed to take him out, you need 18 characters to take him out. And the whole sequence of ambushing him at nighttime, totally fucking up his army while doing it, by the way. And the fact that his final battles are accompanied by an awesome battle track. When you finally strike him down and he gives his final speech, you're almost sad to see him go. At least I was a little bit, just because he was so compelling to watch. And one of the nice little touches I like about Suikoden II versus its predecessor is when you're done killing enemy soldiers, their sprites litter the ground this time in the game. And I personally always loved adding a few Highland soldier sprites to the floor. And speaking of dead sprites, I forgot what happened to Pole in Suikoden 2 since it's been so long. Hard to watch you go, man. We hardly knew ye. Suikoden 2, very much like the original, has a lot of, comedic moments in the game. It has quieter character moments, and those are essential. When games get bogged down with melodrama, it makes them tiring to play sometimes. And very much Suikoden 2 and the Suikoden series at large has always had a sense of humor to it, and that is very much the case with this game, and it only adds to its enjoyability. Perfect example of this, Rune offering soldiers favors, or whatever the hell that scene is. Or Nanami offering, comedic relief with her, fighting guards, or being made fun of for being a tomboy. And a quick note on Nanami, she gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes, but I always, I personally have always kind of liked her, for sure. She has a lot of cool moments, especially towards the end of the game where she's literally knocking arrows out of the air to protect you. She very much endeared herself to me with shit like that. And another thing about Suikoden 2 that is a common point of debate or admiration in the fandom is Joey and his whole perspective on events, his method of achieving his goals, whether it was right, whether it was wrong, was he justified to do what he did? And that's what makes the game so compelling. You can very much sympathize with Joey's point of view. You can understand where he's coming from. The conflict is, were his actions justified? Joey is very much a case of, does the end justify the means?
But irregardless if you think he was right or wrong, watching how far Joey was willing to go in this game was one of the best parts about its story. He commits assassination, betrays multiple kings, and conducts a total war against the city-state. I don't know about you, but that's damn good television.
And with world building, Suikoden 2 is the game that opened the proverbial floodgates. We get mentions of the first time of the Grasslands, Zexen, the Queendom of Falena, Harmonia, the Island Federation, just all that juicy shit that I eat up. Oh, I loved seeing that for the first time, because now everyone at this point started to theorize, where the hell are we going to go next? And speaking of politics and world building, that first time we go to Joustin Hill and we see all the different factions of the city-state together and how they interact with each other. Oh, I ate that shit the fuck up.
But while I was sitting back with a big old bag of popcorn, watching the politicking go down at Joustin Hill and really enjoying myself, there was one guy who wasn't, and that was Joey. And this scene was key in his decision-making process to join the Highland Kingdom, because he saw the division within the city-state, he saw the infighting that was going on, the corruption, and at that moment he decided to change the city-state as an outside force rather than the main protagonist of the game who does it from the inside. And I love it when he circles back to this moment at the very end of the game, because he's not wrong. The city-state of Jowston as it existed in its current state was incredibly ineffective. And I love this full circle moment because within the greater context of the game, the conference at Jowston, I think, is just one of the more regular story beats. Yes, it's very interesting from a political standpoint, but how is the audience supposed to know that this war conference is going to have a deep-seated effect on one of the game's main protagonists? And that's the kind of writing that I love, and that's why I love this fucking game so much. Suikoden II also greatly expanded upon dialogue choices, with some of them having severe repercussions such as character deaths, and some of them could even lead to alternate endings for the game, which just made the replayability for this game that much higher. And Suikoden 2 carries a lot of the same themes that Suikoden 1 did, in particular, racism, or xenophobia. And when we get to those moments in the game where we have myriad races and peoples working together to defend their home, it's almost enough to bring a tear to a grown man's eye. But unfortunately, not everyone in this game is going to work together, because you get characters returning from past Suikoden games that are now your enemy, such as Leon Silverberg. But by and large, he is the exception, and most of the returning characters that you see are characters that you can recruit that you saw in Suikoden 1. And a lot of them have ongoing plot threads from the first game that are resolved in the second game, and it just allows for a lot of fan-pleasing moments. And the biggest of these fan-pleasers has to be, without fucking question, the return to the Tauren Republic. When you get back to Gregminster, you encounter Alan, Grinseal, LaPont, Lot, Mary, Sarah. And if that weren't good enough, you can recruit a couple of these characters as well, such as Lorelei, and you get to pick between Valeria and Kasumi as well. And when you're done that, you can even go to the hill and village of Rokaku, which we only heard about in Suikoden 1. And then a little bit further into the game, we even get to recruit Tur McDowell, the main protagonist from the first fucking game. And he's overpowered and awesome as shit. And you top it all off by having dinner in his original home, along with Cleo and Pawn and Gremio if you were able to save them. And even when you go to the palace for the first time to meet LaPont, you are waiting in the same exact room that Suikoden 1 starts in. Every time I go to Gregminster again in Suikoden 2, I am left mystified. I almost feel like I don't deserve what is happening to me here. Even with all the fan-pleasing moments in this game, there is one scene in particular that made me a little bit misty under the eye. And that was when Polika, the poor little girl that Luca Blight orphaned and, left speechless in terms of the mental trauma he caused her, is parting ways with Joey. And she asks Joey for a favor, since it's the last time that they'll see each other. And she asks him to pick her up and hold her like her father used to. Fuck, man. I was just sitting there, just fucking trying to keep it together. That shit got me right fucking here. Oh, that is some good goddamn writing. And then the other high point of the game's story for me is undoubtedly the game's ending, particularly the game's best ending. Being able to actually reconcile with Joey, becoming friends again, learning that Nanami was not actually killed but is still alive, and that scene where you and Joey are running to the dojo and Nanami sees you and she runs towards you with open arms. Fuck, fantastic. And just knowing that those three are out there together somewhere in the world where, let's face it, I didn't see any fucking way that those three were ever going to be together again. It's all Nanami ever wanted, and when I was playing the game for the first time, I was like, fuck, keep wishing, girl, because given all the shit that's going down, someone is going to be kicking the bucket in this situation. So the fact that we're able to have that type of happy ending, fuck me, so satisfying. And the final scene of the game, showing Joey, Nanami, and the main protagonist all together staring out across that big open field is perfection. And the fact that this game can make me feel these profound emotions after the 6th or 7th time, that is a testament once again to good fucking writing. And if Murayama has aged like a fine wine, oh, Yuden Chronicles should be fucking golden. And as I've stated multiple times throughout this review, this game has amazing music. And it even has great themes that convey a real sense of urgency for what's happening in the story. And the last thing I'm going to mention in terms of music, because how can I not, is the opening animation to Suikoden II. The Suikoden series, especially the first 3 games, have amazing animated intro sequences, and Suikoden II is right up at the top. And Suikoden II has one of the best ones ever in my opinion, and is just all sorts of epic. Such a good fucking game. This is still my favorite game of all time, and obviously it's my favorite game within the Suikoden series as well. You know, it just further reaffirms, you know, this game has good writing, interesting characters, fantastic sprite work, great music, awesome world building, and any game that can make you feel something profound after playing it for the 6th or 7th time is a winner. Thanks for joining me for this game break, everybody. I'll see you next time.